Note the disclaimer.
How does the DreamWorks Fisher Boy sit on a crescent moon? The rest of the moon is still there, right? I want to know what happened to the moon. And is the Earth dead yet? And I don't care if you have bait that gives fish orgasms. Fishing on the moon usually yields negative results.
So much gish gallop in one sin, and we haven't even started the Thor damn movie?
Damn, Spielberg out Disney's Disney by 5 seconds for a massive 32-second logo.
This is only the second time in this series I've covered a logo sin, and I'm still baffled by how Birdman has so many things to say about them. What I will say, however, is this is important to show where the film came from, and a simple 4-second flash screen isn't going to get you anywhere.
This is Berk.
Cliché narration is cliché.
Oh boy, I'm going to have to prepare for this in the next 2 films, aren't I? Alright, well let's start the tradition here. 20 sins for sinning This is Berk. Also sinning expositional dialogue. Would you have preferred he not introduce the island so the audience has no idea where the film takes place?
The only problems are the pests.
How does a village have the money to support life with constant dragon attacks? These dragons are not only stealing their revenue, but also causing constant damage. And who has kids in an environment like this? Who are the real monsters here?
Well, for the last point, Hiccup ends up making it clear that the humans are to blame, due to them seeing the dragons wanting food as them attacking Berk, which is further supported as when the Vikings share their resources with the dragons, the fighting stops. As for the first point, we rarely see these Vikings using money until we come up to the TV shows. But in this village, it looks like there might be a barter system in place. The only resource these Vikings lose in the raids is food, primarily in livestock and fisheries. Not to mention, the dragons don't attack every night. We see it several times in the film, and later on in Holiday Special, it's implied that Snoggletog is a more peaceful holiday during the 300 years they were fighting, because the dragons always fled to a place called the Rookery.
Wooden door sustains dragon fire.
Depending on thickness and species, there are wood types like oak that are fire resistant.
My name's Hiccup. Great name, I know.
Hiccup later explains that his parents believe a terrible name will ward off gnomes and trolls, but we all know it's because his parents believe in the power of cartoon marketing.
Seriously? You were given an explanation about his name choice, and yet you say it's yak dung, and come up with something about marketing? My god, we've reached a new level of idiot with this one. Now, poor Hiccup had been given his name due to being an early birth, and is rumoured to be unexpected. Meanwhile, there's names like Astrid, which is referred to as divine beauty, and eventually Valka, which is meant to mean healthy or strong.
I've been his apprentice ever since I was little. Well, littler.
The point of Hiccup is that he's weak and an underdog, but how can you work in a shop like this for years without building some muscle, and at the very least look bigger than Shaggy?
Okay, look, I get it. In the sequels, he becomes a very big deal. But nowhere in this movie is Hiccup ever stated to be an underdog. At this point, he's known as the weakest Viking on Berk, and is often referred to as useless. As for the strength thing, Gobber mostly had him working some of the easier jobs, even if the point of it was for him to bulk up. Finally, Jeremy, Scooby-Doo called, they want Shaggy back in his own show where he belongs.
Oh, and that's Fish Legs, Snotlout, the twins, Rough Nut and Tough Nut.
Wait, am I supposed to know which one is which? It feels like the filmmakers knew I'd want to be able to know who's who throughout this film, but only half-assed the solution.
Well, yes, because Hiccup describes them as they run past. Rough Nut is the one with 2 long braids going down to her waist, and 2 short braids above her ears, while Tough Nut's locks aren't even styled. And sure, in this movie they may just be comic relief, so you're not entirely supposed to remember their names. But still.
Killing a dragon is everything around here.
But they give you names in order to ward off trolls and gnomes. Dragons, no big whoop, go kill one. Gnomes, we need to protect you from those bitches with the terrible first name of voodoo power.
Yeah, but the dragons don't care so much about what a Viking's name is, unlike a troll or a gnome.
Wait, that worked? Fucking... Wasn't he just talking about how it needed calibrations? Wasn't he firing basically blind? Is this all due to luck or screenwriter ex machina?
Oh, for sake, does it really have to be a Deus Ex Machina for something to work out well for the characters? Why can't it just be luck? Which is exactly what it was, given there were slim chances of it working as opposed to not.
That's not how fire works.
This pole is a thick, solid structure, and it has metal wrapped around the base. It's not going to catch on fire as easily or quickly as dandelion seeds, dried leaves, or thin twigs.
Yeah, but he still has wings and a powerful set of jaws, right? Just because sharks run out of laser beams doesn't mean they can't kill anymore.
Did you honestly think sharks have laser beams like it's an Austin Powers movie? Or was this supposed to be a joke? Because I didn't find that the least bit funny. Also, the fire is in limited supply in these movies, as these dragons all have shot limits. In the case of the monstrous nightmare, once it runs out of gel to light up, its defense is severely lowered. Plus its jaws can't get through Stoic's body, armor or no armor, so it's likely this dragon knew its options are limited here, so had no choice but to fly away.
Oh, and there's one more thing you need to know.
There's one more thing you need to know, narration cliche.
You really love using that word on anything, don't you, Jer? Even if it's incorrect.
Dad.
Somehow, in this uber badass culture where even the weakling kid works with a blacksmith and has the biggest badass father of them all, this kid still grew into a wimp.
I mean, there's a first for everything, isn't there? And if you saw the second and third movies, you'd know he doesn't stay like that.
I can't stop myself. I see a dragon and I have to just kill it.
That's another thing. Maybe I can see this kid growing up a wimp. Maybe. But somehow developing a J. Baruchel accent instead of the Scottish accent these Vikings apparently possess, even though Vikings are Norse. But still, how do you get that?
There's also the fact that dragons exist in this world. They don't seem to show a lot of payment methods in this village. Their manner of speaking sounds more modern. Hiccup is coming up with technology far more advanced than it would normally be for this era. Do I need to go on about this, since you're bringing up reality sins? Or here's a better idea. Stop sinning this movie for being unrealistic! It's an animated film, just go with it.
I have his mess to clean up.
You mean the mess Hiccup made was in any way disproportionate to all the other dragon damage that occurred in the last 30 minutes?
Because one of the torches was burnt, a field ended up being dug, several houses and boardwalks have been destroyed, and several more sheep had been stolen. All because Hiccup didn't stay put. Yes, he got lucky and hit a Night Fury with his bowler launcher, but that doesn't cancel out the fact that he disobeyed his father's orders to stay inside, didn't man the blacksmith stall like Gobber asked him to, and nearly got eaten or flamed by a monstrous nightmare. All that in Stoic's eyes was Hiccup being reckless, and so is blaming him for it.
Excuse me, barmaid. I'm afraid you brought me the wrong offspring.
It's like someone at Pixar just got drunk, watched this movie, swapped a gender or two, and Brave was born.
While I must give you major props for admitting that How to Train Your Dragon came first, I have to stop you while you're ahead and say that even if there's a parent-child conflict and Scottish accents in both movies, HTTYD and Brave are not the same, merely due to the use of magic in Brave and the inclusion of Norse mythology and dragons in How to Train Your Dragon. Not to mention the fact this is in more of a Scandinavian region, so the Scottish accents were already slightly anachronistic, as you pointed out earlier.
If we find the nest and destroy it, the dragons will leave. They'll find another home.
Or they'll get really super mad at you and burn your entire existence to a crisp. I'm just saying, you seem way surer of this supposed outcome than you have any reason to be.
He's desperate to end the war. They've been at it for 300 plus years, lost hundreds of soldiers in each attack. The dragons took away Hiccup's mother and are generally seen as extremely dangerous. This is coming out of desire to exterminate these creatures and restore peace. He's not thinking logically.
Also, during that entire dragon attack, did absolutely no one die?
Some may have, but it wasn't important to the story, so they didn't cover it. You're just making an asinine assumption and then sinning the movie for it.
Now who's with me?
Today's not good for me.
Is he the f***ing leader or what? Why is he even asking permission?
Somebody left his brain at home before coming to the recording booth. He's not asking their permission, he's asking who will be joining him on this mission.
Goes hunting for trolls.
Trolls exist. They steal your socks.
If all trolls do is steal socks, why are we so afraid of them that we name our children stupid like Hiccup just to avoid them?
Humor. That's why.
Hiccup is not that boy.
Father disappointed his son isn't more like him cliche.
Objection hearsay. This is a common storytelling device that still works no matter the medium, and can still elicit an emotional response. You're just overusing the word cliché here to the point where it loses all meaning.
I managed to lose an entire dragon.
Well, that dialogue is awfully coincidental to your forest findings.
One bunch of nonsense about the plot does not a sin make, Mr. Scott. Besides, you missed the real sin, which was the branch that whacks Hiccup in the face, disappears when he looks at a broken tree. Yet another example of your hyper-observance failing.
Dragon adorability is a trait I cannot believe they evolved during the time they also evolved fire, claws, jaws, and all sorts of killer
Dragon adorability? What, just because of how Toothless looks here? Well, no, Hiccup isn't looking at this dragon and thinking he looks cute. He's thinking he looks frightened, helpless, and innocent here. He even explains this later in the film when he says to Astrid that he saw himself when he looked at Toothless.
All dragons have a limited number of shots. How many does a Gronkle have?
It doesn't matter the number because it misses on every shot.
If it was the first 3, I'd agree with you. But the 4th and 5th shots hit Snotlout and Hiccup, getting their shields. And the 6th one would have killed Hiccup if Gobber didn't intervene.
A dragon will always go for the kill.
Except during this training session.
I mean, the Gronkle still tried though. The only reason it failed is because the trainees were slightly quicker on their feet, and Gobber's there to keep them safe. Not to mention Toothless spared Hiccup earlier when he freed him from the restraints. So this, among other instances of the dragons actually being more than soulless creatures, proves Gobber wrong. I'd say more, but Captain Vader already did so in his video, so I'm just going to add a few more sins just for another instance of you leaving your brain at home.
Why read words when you can just kill the stuff the words tell you stuff about?
Discount Steve Holt.
Arrested Development called, they want their character back.
For some reason, Hiccup waits until nighttime to come back to this dragon manual. Probably because he knows that when people learn stuff about things, you need to set a certain mood. Movie takes its book solve everything cue from Buffy and Harry Potter.
Oh, for Thor's sakes. Okay, I'll let 2 sins play here to show that obviously Jeremy doesn't read books or understand the people who read them. First off, not everyone reads books in the dark. Several people I know have read books in the day, and nowadays if you have a Kindle, you can read a massive library anywhere, anytime. As for the book Solve Everything sin, not only is that 2 arbitrary popular media references that aren't even a sin of the movie, but the manual is essential for understanding how to exterminate the dragons, which ends up becoming an outdated piece of parchment later on in the film, until revisions. And it was already slightly out of date by this point because there's no illustration of the Night Fury, and very little information aside from the warnings. So not only am I going to add 2 sins for this here, but I'm also going to add a further 50 for this whole new level of stupid.
Entire Viking existence seems to revolve around dragons, as opposed to, Vikings.
You do know that these motifs have swords going through the dragons, right? As well as the fact that Vikings and dragons have been at war for more than 300 years at this point. Also, there's one mast that has a Viking breathing fire. Odin's beard, you really do know how to make anything sound bad when you add a dumb sin to it, huh?
Ah! I'm really beginning to question your teaching method.
So am I.
Jeremy yells at the screen cliche. Also, martial arts students do a similar thing to them, as well as military trainees.
Look for its blind spot. Every dragon has one.
What? Really? But why? That seems like a huge evolutionary flaw, actually.
We humans also have blind spots, Jeremy. You want to sin us for having that evolutionary disadvantage too?
I mean, should you even be training with dragons capable of wiping out your entire training grounds in 10 seconds?
Why do you think the arena is dug out of stone and has a metal cage over it? Plus the walls aren't even permanent fixtures there.
Our parents' war is about to become ours. Figure out which side you're on.
Okay, Astrid seems like kind of a dick. He's clearly on the human side. Just because he's terrible at dragon fighting doesn't mean he wants to see all humans killed. Jesus.
It's more so because he didn't do anything but ask Gobber questions about Night Furies, messing up the training session in the process. Astrid here being frustrated is telling Hiccup to take this more seriously so it doesn't result in anyone getting killed. Sure, the wording is harsh, but this doesn't change how she feels about his interruptions.
Luckily, dragons understand human gestures that mean I come in peace.
I'd like to remind you there, Jezza, that Hiccup was previously holding this knife over Toothless while he was stuck in the bowlers, and clearly Toothless has enough brains to know it's a murder weapon, and that Hiccup throwing it away means he doesn't intend to kill.
Despite the fact that I don't think dragons would ever evolve to be this cute, you gotta admit, Toothless is a pretty likable character. And, well, he has to be in order for this to work. I'm not made of stone, damn it.
I'm glad you removed a sin for this, but you sandwich it in between 2 sins about Toothless understanding or being confused by human characteristics as if they contradict each other, meaning this removal is sadly pointless as you add one back anyway.
Dragon that understands that kicking a knife in the water means peace is definitely confused about the I want to pet you gesture for some reason.
For some reason? Have you ever tried petting a wild animal? The concept of petting is obviously going to be foreign to a creature that could be considered wild, even one as clever as Toothless.
So, I can see why people are afraid of smaller things like snakes and spiders, but why would a dragon have any reason to be afraid of eels, ever?
Well, like earlier, Captain Vader covered this, but I'll add a little more context in here. Eating eels can make a dragon sick, giving it eel pox, as we see in an episode of the TV series Defenders of Berk. So naturally, given this, dragons would want to avoid eating them as opposed to ship? Hang on. No, that's not right. So naturally, given this, dragons would want to avoid eating them as opposed to sheep, fish, chicken, and dragon nip.
Don't you mind me, I'll just get back here.
Hiccup thinks he can just attach his invention to Toothless's tail without him knowing or caring. And even though nothing happens, this is some presumptive right here.
You admit nothing happens and still sin it? My Odin, what kind of movie reviewer are you?
Now think about what you've done.
Why would you throw the eel into the cage? People could easily figure out your newfound cheat method, and now you've got to find another eel.
How would anybody else have figured out that dragons are afraid of eels? For all Gobber and the other trainees knew, he just pushed them back into their pen, and he's not going to need another eel. He goes on to work out other methods of training the dragons.
And what happened to all the smoke and gas that was here just 10 seconds ago?
It all blew away and dissipated, Jeremy. Especially since the top of the arena still has openings in the cage.
Hiccup saw Toothless rolling around in grass a second ago, and makes the huge assumption that holding out a handful of it will make the dragons docile.
Well, yes, because this grass is referred to as dragon nip. It's a mood stabilizer for dragons, so of course it's going to work. This invalidates your sin.
Also, Hiccup keeps learning things with this one species of dragon that somehow work for all species of dragons.
Well, yes, the skills are transferable. They may not be the exact same in terms of size, shape, firepower, or colour, but generally something that works for one dragon will work for others, just like how zookeepers mostly treat their big cats similarly to a domestic cat.
Hiccup brings a deadly and feared dragon that he loves into his town that wants to kill dragons. And they make noise right when Astrid is walking nearby, because the script said so, of course.
The reason why Toothless is in the village is because the hook that connects Hiccup's safety cord got pressed in during the crash, which jammed him into Toothless's saddle, and he needs a tool from the smithy to help loosen it. They make noise because earlier they were being careful, but are now rushing and panicking just as Astrid happens to walk past. You could have just left this as a convenience sin and be done with it, but you had to misunderstand the reason as to why it was happening. And just so you know, I still would have sinned it even if it was a convenience sin.
He can barely walk through the village without being swarmed by his new fans.
That's another thing. Hiccup's popularity is such that I don't understand how a big fan of his hasn't secretly followed him to his hideout to see the dragon training.
Well, he's always come up with an excuse for it, or would have thrown them off the trail by just going back home or over to the smithy, then once the coast was clear, race towards the cove.
Hiccup luck sacks his way back onto the dragon after many seconds of free falling.
What is it with you and luck, mate? Did someone not win anything on a claw machine no matter how many tokens you used?
Yeah! While Hiccup rides this dragon, I can't help but think, discount Atreyu and Falcor.
First off, never-ending story called, and they want their characters back. Second, I can't tell if you're being racist or not due to the fact that Falcor is white and Toothless is black. Huh. Maybe you are. Thirdly, not removing at least one sin for this epic test flight sequence. That's worth a few extra.
Elder, who's had an amazing view of all the training so far, still hasn't seen Hiccup do any of his cheats.
Because Hiccup was already mostly in the Zippleback cage when he threw the eel in it. No one was able to see the sprig of dragon nip used on the Gronkle. She may have seen the natter scratching on an angle where she couldn't see Hiccup doing it, and thought Hiccup scared the terrible terror back into its cell just by using his shield instead of using the light reflecting off of it.
I can't wait. I am so leaving.
Wait, he won the honor of killing the dragon, but they didn't make him do it right there in the ring? Is it so he has time to figure out a solution?
No, it's because anyone who succeeds in the Trial of Flame and is then granted the honor of killing the monstrous nightmare is meant to do it the next day. This way, the Viking that wins it gets any residual training or rest out of the way before then. Maybe next time pay attention before you make an asinine sin.
Finally, You'd think someone as suspicious as her would have figured this out days ago.
But she didn't, because Hiccup made a different turning and Astrid lost the trail.
If anyone can fly around in a movie, you can bet the movie will dedicate 5% of its runtime to flying around.
Wait. Are you just handing out random sins for the movie having flying scenes? Even though it's a movie about a kid who trains a dragon? Are you padding the sin count again? Because I think you are.
Kid flies his dragon super close to his hometown Viking village that lived for killing dragons.
But no one will see it because Toothless is a night fury. Their black scales can blend into the night sky, and no one's even making noise for the villagers to hear anyway. So they won't know that there's a dragon off the shoreline or anyone riding it unless Toothless were to make his signature dive-bombing noise, spit fire, or roar.
Tyrannosaurus Smaug. No, discount T-Rexilla. It's one of those two.
Okay, you put those Jurassic Park and Hobbit references right back where you found them, Jeremy.
What are you looking at?
Man, someone could score a viral hit with a supercut of all the animated movie characters who have said this to their animal sidekick in a lame attempt at comedy.
Funny, I could say the same thing about your They Survived This sins, among others.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but this dragon competition arena is even more deadly and unsafe than the one in Goblet of Fire.
Truth be told, I haven't seen Goblet of Fire yet. But from what I heard from Captain Vader...
You're saying that as if in Goblet of Fire, that dragon didn't escape and chase Harry.
At least this movie keeps them in for the Trial of Flame.
During the entire time Toothless tried to fly out here earlier for survival, he never found this relatively easy wall to climb.
Because he was panicking about being stuck in the cove and angry about half of his tail being ripped off, and wasn't thinking clearly. However, after hearing Hiccup's screams, he refocused his attention on trying to find a way out. You always do this, asking why people who are under duress don't find the most obvious or clever solutions and make arbitrary sins for it.
They killed hundreds of us!
Never on screen, though.
Because we don't need to see it. We can imagine it just fine. Similarly with the vice versa.
Oh no, what you're up against, it's like nothing you've ever seen.
Hiccup says vague bull like this, instead of there are 50,000 dragons there and one the size of a f***ing mountain.
But even if he did, Stoic isn't going to listen. And Hiccup even says he never listens unless it's with a scowl on his face.
You're not my son.
This asshole finally says what everyone has always known he thought, and it's presented as some whammy moment.
Because Stoic is upset at Hiccup's insubordination, and it's going to hurt Hiccup hearing that, coming from the man who has raised him for 15 years. Even when Stoic comes to regret saying that later, it's going to take a lot of effort for them to get past it.
I bet he's really frightened now. What are you going to do about it?
And of course he thinks of what to do immediately after she says this.
Actually, he just says he'll do something stupid, later crazy, and doesn't say anything until they arrive at the arena with the rest of the trainees.
Some, not me, are wondering if there is in fact a plan at all, and what it might be.
Find the nest and take it.
At first, we sin the fact that this unquestioned leader had to go to council. Now that we know there's a council, since when can Stoic just do whatever the hell he wants? Earlier when they went out to find the nest, he had to appeal to a council of some sort. Now he can just lead a bunch of men into boats without any knowledge of what they're getting into.
This is mostly to do with how Hiccup accidentally informed Stoic that only a dragon can find the island. And Stoic is more eager to destroy or take over the nest after what he saw Hiccup attempt to do in the arena with the monstrous nightmare.
Sure, Toothless is giving directions now, but they had to get to this point for it to happen. How did they know which direction to sail in the first place?
They've gone to this same area several times before, but never managed to get further due to the fog. The only difference is that they have Toothless pointing out the way, since the Red Death is sending signals to him.
I'm impressed this totally male-dominated society has a woman warrior. Too bad they couldn't give her a line.
This is sinning something you like, by the way. Also, you seem to either forget or ignore any lines said by Astrid and Roughnut. Plus there's Phlegma the Fierce, who congratulated Stoic on Hiccup's achievements upon his return to Berk.
I do not believe you can punch holes in mountains by lobbing small rocks at it. I just don't think that makes any logical or scientific sense at all. Even if the mountain is hollow and has walls this thin, you're still on thin ice with me, movie.
Right, so even though you acknowledge why this would make sense, you still choose to sin it because it isn't believable. You were already on thin ice with me here, but the cracks are now showing more explicitly.
Damn, this Indominus Godzilla waited so long to breathe fire on Stoic he allowed time for an Ex Machina.
Wrong. The trainee showing up wasn't a Deus Ex Machina, because we see a scene of Hiccup getting the future riders acquainted with their dragons before arriving at the nest. Also, the Red Death takes a while to charge her fire attacks due to the size of the dragon and because she was distracted by Stoic and Gobber. Also, Red Death is a she, not a he. I know the movie's characters refer to her as a he, but Astrid says it right when she's the queen of the nest.
Also, this actually might be the worst part of a good movie. How do you get dragons, which fear their giant master so much, to attack said master? Not only that, these kids managed to learn how to fly dragons at the speed of improvisation, a skill which took months for Hiccup to learn.
Because these dragons have built trust with the trainees, and they've been locked up on the island for Thor knows how long. Of course they're going to go against the Queen, and of course they're going to be frightened, but this is necessary to ensure the dragon's safety and end the war. If this action wasn't taken, the war would continue, and many more needless deaths of dragons and Vikings will ensue. Also, saying this is the worst part of a good movie, that's worth a few extra. As for the learning element, it took Hiccup months because he had to build Toothless a new tail fin and work out the controls all on his own. The rest of the dragons, however, are still able-bodied, so they had no extra gear to work with.
Oh, Jesus, the shackles and fire weren't enough phony rescue tension. Now we have to sit through a he definitely won't drown either scene.
Sweet baby Thor in a thunderstorm, do you want Hiccup dead? Because that's what it sounds like. And if any more of this continues, I'm throwing you in contempt of court.
Why hasn't Toothless chewed or laser-breathed his shackles off yet?
That could probably have something to do with the large restraint around his neck.
This is such an awesome noise. He's all business, but there's still that bond underneath it. One sin removed for a pure character moment.
Yet another sin removal that I have to sin, mostly due to the Thor Forsaken laugh. Wait, hang on. That was real? That's why he removed a sin? I'm gonna have to fix that then. My apologies, everyone. It seems I have my wires crossed, because apparently that was genuine given the way he says the next line straight after. So for that, I am officially taking one off.
I'm sorry. For everything.
Dad thinks this is the right time for this.
I'm proud to call you my son.
Oh my god, do this later!
There's a possibility that Hiccup could die if he did this. And if he left it for later, it might be too late.
I'm on it first!
These characters have been so undeveloped, I had no idea there was some sort of competitive rivalry between them until this scene, nearly at the end of the movie. Luckily, it services the plot.
Bruh, did you fall asleep during this movie? When Hiccup was introducing them, they were fighting over a bucket of water. In the first training session against the Gronkle, they were fighting over a shield before they both got eliminated. And they fought over a blind spot on the Nada before it noticed them and blew fire at them. This was already previously established, and you're only just noticing it now?
This asshole chases them a long time without firing his killer breath, because protagonists.
Red Death is a female, and she wasn't using her flame here because she thought she could catch up to them and eat them in one fell swoop.
Well, they're both going to survive this, and the movie isn't going to give two shits about explaining it, so sin for sure.
Toothless survives this because dragon skin is fireproof. And Hiccup survives this because Toothless caught and wrapped him in his wings, albeit minus a leg.
You see, because Toothless basically lost a body part that helped him move around, it only makes sense that Hiccup lost something of his own because symmetry and stuff.
What's your point?
Hiccup learns he lost a leg and learns to walk on the new artificial leg all in the span of 1 minute.
Except you see him limping here, since the initial wound or the prosthetic might be a bit painful for him. Not to mention, Toothless helps him to the door.
This is Berk.
Repeating earlier narration, only this time with new understanding or irony cliche.
Well, I've started it. No turning back now.
Happy ending, but don't dragons live for hundreds of thousands of years? This is actually a tragedy if you think about Toothless lonely and on his own for decades after Hiccup dies. Kinda like that Futurama episode about frying his dog.
Ooh, aged like milk this one did, since the trilogy ends with Toothless and the rest of the dragons leaving for the hidden world. With occasional visits here and there.
Oh yeah? Well, you know what this is? The size of your brain. No, wait. That's much better.
Like you've ever seen my brain. Come on, Hook.
What? He started it.
And with that, court is adjourned. Be sure to leave any more suggestions for CinemaSins sins down below, and I will see you in the next video.